Okay, so let's talk about Enneagram with relationships, because obviously Strength Finders is a test that someone would have to take. Enneagram is something that you could start to recognize. And one of the things that I do initially when I'm thinking, okay, this is somebody that I really want to understand. I mean, obviously, when you're just having a surface conversation with someone, it doesn't matter. But if it's kind of going in a direction where you're like, I really love to understand where they're coming from and how to approach this person, because I want to make a connection. Making authentic connections is when the definition of it really is being able to speak in a way they understand and they can take it in and absorb it. Because when you understand their Enneagram or their temperament, personality style, you can communicate in a way that they can receive it and you can connect to their biggest, greatest needs just on the surface, obviously, because everybody is a lot more dynamic than that. But that's the point. Okay, so let's look at each number. So ones. Usually you can recognize a one because they are proper. They tend to be a little bit more guarded and they don't emote a lot. They tend to be thoughtful in that they're observing everything because they're very analytical. They're perfectionists. And I really don't love that word because perfectionist can mean somebody is um, you know, not friendly or, judgy. They can be on a bad side, but you can tell a one because they're very neat and tidy. They tend to be a little bit more precise and very kind of stoic in some ways, not always. They can be friendly because it depends on what their wing is. So it's not an initial impression. It's as you start to dialogue, you watch the way they carry themselves. They tend to be slower to speak. They are not very fast paced. Okay. Twos are warm. They tend to be very warm. They tend to be very polite. They're helpers. They usually ask more about what they can do. They tend to be the people that are serving, and they are usually the ones that, cook for you or ask how they can help. They're a little bit more soft spoken, but it depends because a 2-3 can be a little bit bolder, but they still tend to be friendly rather than stoic or aggressive or jovial. Okay, they're friendly. It's a really good way to say it. So you can usually spot a 2 that way. Threes they are leaders. They can't help it. That's just how they're wired. They are take charge. They're very direct. They can be friendly and emotive, but usually they've got to get to know you before they're going to really open up, and very rarely do they open up. They tend to have a very accurate perception of the vision, what's going on. They really work to be correct. The threes that I know usually are right. Like I usually will defer if I'm not sure because they don't like to be wrong and they don't like to look stupid. And so they tend to know the answers because they have done some research or figuring out or analyzing before they're going to move forward. They're big picture people, very strong personalities. Okay. Competitive usually, but definitely driven. They're achievers. So that's how you can recognize a 3. They're usually in charge. Okay. Fours are the creatives. They're very dreamy. I think of people now that I know, and I'm like, oh, I bet you she's a 4 because they are very much into thinking about how they come across. They can be artsy, and they usually dress a little different. They usually approach things differently. They have creative language a lot of times. So think of a 4 as those types of artsy, creative people. Um, And artsy, not meaning it can be any kind of arts. It could be in writing, it could be in singing, it could be in painting, it could be anything. Okay. Then the fives. Fives are those that are they usually take charge. I need okay. So fives are they're investigators, they are inventors. So they love digging deep into a topic. So they definitely are experts. So whatever their field is, they tend to be experts in their field. They want to really know the down and dirty. They're also people who are self-sufficient. They want to really not rely on anybody else. They have a short capacity for people. Doesn't mean they're not people friendly, and it doesn't mean that they don't like people. It just means that they just don't need a lot of people. They don't need a lot of time with people. They really love information and they like being prepared and self-sufficient. So think of that when you're thinking of a five, self-sufficient. And like I said, they tend to be experts in their field and not super high capacity for people. Okay. So what I look for, and I'm going to pause right there, is as I'm talking through these, I want you to think about who pops into your mind as a symbol of that person, and they can tend to be your barometer. So when you meet someone else, if they kind of remind you of that person or they have some similarities, then it may mean, oh, you know what? They may be a one or they may be a five. And fives are kind of probably fives and fours, I feel personally, are the hardest to pinpoint. They're not as obvious to me as other types. So, and also a lot of times it depends on their wing. So they may not be as obvious because maybe the five has a wing. Um, let's see, 6 or 4. If a five has a wing 4, then they can fool you a little bit because they are creative. They are kind of out there a little bit more than a 5, 6 who is clearly analytical, cautious, and not as much of a people person. Okay. So remember that, but I think getting the broad idea will help you to be able to pinpoint. And it's not to label people, it's to help you to be able to communicate with them in a style that they would respond to. And it's also being sensitive to some of the things that they need. Like for instance, a 5. I have 5 friends that I know that they have a limited capacity for people, and I can't expect them to be able to go as much as I can when it comes to like fun and playful and time, but if I talk on a topic they love, oh, they could talk for hours because they really are deep, thoughtful people. Okay, so let's keep going. Sixes. Sixes are those who tend to be very security minded. They look at the possibilities of what if. What if this happened? This could happen. I need to prepare for this. So they're a little bit more cautious and skeptical, and they like to be prepared. They're loyal. They're rule followers because they like safety and security. They like good leadership. They look to experts. They look for people who are authorities of something that they want to do. Sixes need that reassurance because they're safety and security. So they seek out good, wise counsel and can get very mad when leadership isn't good because they are very much about safety and security and following rules. And so that's how you can kind of recognize a lot of times sixes, because those are those people who will be like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm not sure about that. I need to think about it. Okay. Sevens are enthusiasts. They're people. They tend to be talkative, outgoing, not all. But sevens are definitely the enthusiasts. They're the positive people. They're the people who, no matter what, are going to say, yeah, I'm having a bad day, but it's okay. It's going to be fine. It's all going to work out. They don't like to stay on sad. So they're always going to make a twist and reframe things into the positive. Their passion is being positive and always looking for fun or something, a good way to do something, making everything fun. And that's the typical 7. But again, if they're slant to an 8, they're probably a little bit more on the direct, keep it simple, short, sweet, and they will go after something they believe in. And then the 7 wing 6 would be a little bit more of that cautious. So again, knowing their wing, or if you see some tendencies, like let's say you see some tendencies of a 6, of someone being cautious, but you're like, yeah, but she's pretty spontaneous and she has a lot of fun. Well, then maybe she's a 6 wing 7. So this is, as you start to learn every single number, you will see the twist. It's really, really cool. Okay, so that's the 7. And then the 8 is the challenger. The challenger is somebody who is very direct. A lot of times you think they're mean. A lot of times you think they're aggressive, but really they're just direct. They just don't get into the fluff. They're not fluffy. They're very pointed. They're going to call something out. They're bold. They are leaders who take charge. And they can be very driven also and competitive, but they're just going to go about it, not worrying about image. They don't really care. They just want to get the job done. They want to get to the point. And they also will fight for things they believe in. They're challengers. Okay. So those are people that you can't be mushy gushy with. You can't expect them to. Don't take things that they say personally. You've got to stand firm with them and strong with them. They love that. And knowing that they, if somebody is on the negative side of an 8 and kind of aggressive, then you can tell, and there's no changing their mind. You got to back off because there is no limits with someone who is an 8 and they're not healthy. Okay. Nines are the opposite of 8. They're very peaceful and passive. Again, depends on their wing, but 9s are pretty much go with the flow. They like peace. So they're just really like, a lot of times they'll assess, see what the group is feeling like, and they're going to say, all right, you know what? Why don't we do that? That's cool with me. I'm good with that. Or they'll go, you know what? This is probably the best for the group. Let's do this. And they're going to find the best way to bring peace. And the peace a lot of times with them is for themselves. They want to feel the peace. And so it's not so much that they're trying to make everybody else happy. It's that they just don't want to be stressed out. They don't like stress and anxiety. They don't like pressure. They really do like to flow in a peaceful way. And so those tend to be people who are like, yeah, you know that they don't sweat the small stuff. They're those people that you can go, hey, do you want to do this? They're like, sure. They're pretty easygoing. If you ask them what they're thinking or what they want to do, they're usually like, I don't know. I mean, whatever. And they just don't necessarily think a whole lot about things. They go on instinct, and their instinct usually is whatever brings them peace. And so, but if they're a wing 8, they're a stronger stance of a 9. They're not a pushover. I'm not saying that 9s are pushovers, but they just would rather have peace than really any other thing. It's just that important to them. But they will stand up for things they believe in. If they have that wing 8, especially, they'll be bold when they have to be, but for the most part, they pick their battles. 9-1s can be a little bit more controlling. They can show signs of being anal about certain things and being particular about certain things. They're not going to make the biggest deal. In fact, sometimes it can turn into passive aggressive because there are things that are important to them, but they don't want to cause any problems. They want the peace. And so that 9-1 can definitely flip on you sometimes, most of the time like this, but there can be other times where they'll be like, no, we need to do it this way because this is the right way. And it's interesting how 9 wing 1 can step up in a detailed way, and the 9-8 can step up in a challenging way when it comes more to like personal things. So it's really different. Those are the 9 types. So what I like to do in thinking about each number is I think of people that I know that are that number. And then when I meet someone, I kind of can usually determine what they're not. And so then once I figure out what they're not, then I can go to what out of what's left, I can kind of look at what's their past history, what's their job, what's their family life, what's, some of the other things going on in their life. And then that really starts to kind of help you narrow it down. Their job career, especially when they're older and they've been in a career a long time or they're drawn to certain things, a lot of times that can tell you too. So, but again, the point is really to say, oh, I'm sensitive to the fact that this person doesn't like negativity. Oh, I'm sensitive to the fact that this person's safety and security is so important that I really need to give them time to make a decision. Or this one. So then I'm able to really give them an environment where they feel relaxed enough to be authentic and then to build trust. And that's what you really want in making authentic connections. And I really think knowing these things really helps. So I hope that helps you as well.